It's easy. I think it's probably easy, at least, for people who are at the front of the church. It's easy for us to think we know about them because we see them and we hear them speak quite regularly, and you feel you know them. But of course, we never know each other fully, and there's always bigger stories, sort of more hinterland in all of our lives than any of us would display from the front of the church. So it's kind of like a real delight to um, take some time just to chat with Ian, someone who is known and loved by all of us, but to talk to him about his own journey, his own life, and his own hopes and dreams and experiences. So, Ian, good afternoon. How nice to spend this time in this context with you. Does it feel odd to be interviewed?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, I mean, we spend time with each other on Zoom quite a lot, but this is different. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
cool, quite exciting.
quite well. Let's lower the bar of
But
expectation.
this is your life.
This is your life. Tell us. Begin by telling us how did you come to faith? Tell us that journey. Tell us that story.
Okay, so grew up in a family that didn't really mention faith at all, so didn't really know what anything about faith or what my parents believed and stuff. Um, I did. My brother and I were sent to something called Good News Club when we were, I don't know, probably between 7 and 11, maybe. And it was interesting. It was at an Elim Pentecostal church in York. Um, and we used to go. I think my mum sent us there because my mum had this, thought it was a good thing, and I think she had kind of like a kind of nominal faith. And my brother and I went, and to be honest, we had a great time. They used to give out these rainbow sweets, so we loved that. And you sing all the sort of, the Christian classics that we still love today. Be bold, be strong, and all that stuff. And really enjoyed it, and loved. To be fair, I loved hearing about the Bible. But it was probably once a week for, and I don't really know how long we did that for. It wasn't that long. And then I do remember, and I remember singing the songs at school as well, like in assembly. So I was quite an unsettled child at school and quite a naughty kid as well. But the one thing that the teachers loved about me was that I used to sing really loud in assembly. And I remember one of the teachers who really didn't like me very much because I was always in bother. She used to go, "That was lovely singing Ian Peacock." And I was, when he was singing like "Light Up the Fire and Let the Flame Burn," all those sorts of songs, the great classics. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I don't know if I really thought too much about the lyrics, but I loved singing them. I loved belting them out. And then basically, like most kids, went through school and got into all sorts of scrapes and bother and stuff like that. I was quite unhappy for a few years at school, and then I got to making the choice about going to sixth form. And I thought, I don't know, is that just where all the geeks are going to be? I don't know if all my mates were like the cool hard knocks or into football or fighting or both, and most of them didn't go to sixth form. So I was like, well, I'm going to be going with all these kids that I used to basically bully at school. And I got there and I just found that there was all these really, like everybody had their own sort of uniqueness. And there were actually some of the ones that I thought were really geeky and were actually really cool. And all the lads that I used to think were brilliant were actually, most of them were idiots. And then I met whilst I was there. So I was in a band and, still really sort of cocky band, wanted to be a rock star, and also really into football and all that stuff. So I was really sort of cocky and arrogant, and then I met Morag at sixth form. So and she was basically, we sort of just chatted and we actually had a laugh about wheat crunchies, bacon wheat crunchies. We used to buy them from the tuck shop at the sixth form. And we used to do like a Geordie accent. So she'd be behind the tuck shop and she'd be like, "What are you having today, pet?" And I'd be like, "I'll have a packet of bacon and wheat crunchies, mate." And then we just started off talking about, just silly things like that. And we both did drama as well. So there'd be times where I think out of an excuse to try and sort of get to know her a little bit, I'd say, "Can you help me with this essay?" And around about the same time, basically, God brought 4 people into my life that were all Christians in different scenarios. So there was a mature student who did music she was in her 20s, maybe she might have been 30 actually. And then there were 2 lads I worked in a cafe. I was working in a cafe from I was 14, and they were both Christian. They were really nice lads, really good fun, and they were sort of like clean living guys. So like I didn't know anybody like that at that stage. So I was really inquisitive about these lads, and I really liked them. but they were definitely different to most of the kids that I knocked about with. So there was those three in Morag, and God basically it was like he brought four people into my life around the same time. And then it all sort of converged with this mature student saying, well, my husband's in a band as well. And I was like, oh, brilliant, cool. Where's he playing and stuff? She said, oh yeah, he's got this gig on. She basically hoodwinked me into going to a Christian worship event, basically. And it was a bit naughty, really, but I'm glad she did. And she said, "Oh yeah, it's at this." And again, really interesting. It was at an Elim Pentecostal church, which I had no concept of any sorts of churches really. And I said, "Well, I'll go to it, and we'll ask the band if you want to come." And they said yes. And then when she said where it was, I was like, "Oh, it's at a church. Well, it might be all right. We'll go anyway." And then obviously I'd started hanging around with Morag. I don't think we were going out at that stage. And anyway, no, we were going out. We did go out. I asked Morag out, and she, to her surprise, she said yes, because she would not have gone out with somebody like me. So she's still like, I don't know why I said yes at that time. It must have just been my charm, but she would not have gone out with somebody like me, not just because I wasn't a Christian, but just because of the sort of lad I was. But she found herself saying yes. And then we went to this gig, and it was just like basically people singing like Delirious and Matt Redman and stuff. And it was like, I sort of recognize the genre of music, but I've never heard these songs, and I don't understand. They're all singing about God, and they were just having a great time. And none of them, there was not a joint or a pint in sight. And I was like, what's going on here? Like, there's nobody drinking, and there's nobody, but they're all having a brilliant time. They look genuinely happy. And I think I looked and I thought, I don't really have that. Like, I don't have that inner joy that these people seem to have. I don't have that peace that these people seem to have. And then they did, in the sort of interval bit after the band had played, they did a mime to a song by Carmen. So old school, New York kind of gospel kind of rapper come cheesy bloke Carmen. And he was one of the first Christian musicians I'd heard, because Morag's dad used to play in the van when she invited me to an Alpha course, and he was helping taking the Alpha course, and he used to play Christian music to me to try, DC Talk, Carmen, Ian White doing the Psalms. So anyway, so this song was called This Blood, which you probably know. It's a famous song about the crucifixion, and they did a mime to it. And I just remember feeling like this incredible feeling in my stomach of, I think it was just conviction, really. I think it was like, wow, it was my sin. Like, it was my sin that did this to Jesus. And I just felt incredibly overwhelmed at the end of this night. And it's really funny because all the rest of the lads were like, oh, why did we go to that? That was a disaster. But then Morag and I, on the way home, we got the last bus home. And I just was bombarding her in front of this like full double-decker bus in York, full of like mixture of people who were drunk and people coming back from work, just saying, okay, well, they've got to exist. What about dinosaurs? And what about such and such? And I was just absolutely bombarding her with questions. And everybody was like listening, going, oh, this is interesting. So she said, well, my dad's doing an Alpha course, so he's helping lead in this Alpha course. Why don't you just come on it? So I said, yeah, great, I will do. I'll come on it. Anyway, just like all these people were just like really lovely people that I'd never met, who all wanted to hug me, which was a bit weird because I didn't even hug my own parents. So it was like, this is weird. Like these random strangers in the middle-aged strangers who want to hug me and kiss me. Like, not sure about that. Particular blokes. So. It was. But I actually, after a few weeks of it, because it's like a totally different culture, I just thought, oh, these people are just so lovely. They're genuinely people, and they're genuinely interested in me, and they could see all the sort of rough edges. I was like really obstinate and really sort of argumentative. I know it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe, isn't it? Argumentative in these Alpha discussions, but they were so incredibly gracious with me. And then after about 3 or 4 weeks, I think it was after, like, why did Jesus die? It kind of just made sense. And I just thought, right, well, I don't feel any different, but I know that I'm unhappy. I know that I'm looking for something. And I know that I've met people who seem to have got it all together, who seem to have something that I want. So I give it a whirl. So I just remember being in year 12, lower 6, getting the Why Jesus booklet and looking at the back. There's that prayer in the back, that sorry, thank you, please, basically. Praying, kneeling down on the side of my bed and praying it, expecting something massive to happen, and obviously nothing did. And I went, oh, right, okay, well, I've prayed it, but I guess I'll go back to college and see what happens. And I think I thought, well, I'll give it a whirl for a bit, and then, you know, if nothing changes, then I can always just go back to what I was like before, and you know, doing all the other sort of stuff I used to do with the band and all the rest of it, um, and it was amazing. Like, as I started to pray, things started to happen. I was like, that feels coincidental. I prayed for that, and then more and more of these things started to happen, and I thought, oh wow, that's amazing. That's another coincidence, or maybe prayer does work. And then, tied in really with Morag and I, we discussed we talked about going to university, and then we'd said about, we weren't willing to live together, because it was like, Morag's like, well, I said, why not? And Morag's like, well, it's not really, as Christians, we shouldn't live together. And I was like, well, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with it. We know we're not going to be doing anything. We'll just like stuff everybody else. And she said, well, yeah, but there's stuff in the Bible about, you know, doing what looks right in the sight of man and God wherever's possible. And it's like, you know, that most people will jump to those conclusions no matter whatever you do behind closed doors. She said, so I just don't think we should live together if we go to uni. And I'd sort of said, so then I said, oh, I don't know. She said, we could get married. And I went, whoa, I might want to live with my mates first. So and going all day and stuff. So I remember going away really offended that night, obviously. But anyway, after a while, I come around to the idea, and I thought, actually, yeah, we could get married. And like, she basically said, like, look, if you can, you know, if we're together, then, you know, we're either together forever, or there's no point in being together. And I was like, well, yeah, totally. And I feel the same. She said, well, then if we know we're going to be together forever, why we're waiting to get married? I'm like, well, yeah, of course, because we know we're going to be together. So let's just get married. So I think it was just a bit weird, because my parents were divorced as well, so not a particularly great experience with that. And obviously nobody our age was getting married. Anyway, one of the things that answered prayers was, I'd said yes, but I was still like churning it over in my mind, really. Two answers to prayer. One was, one for me was, I was praying like, God, I don't want to be in the position where we, you know, 20 years down the line or whatever, we've got kids, and then we find that we don't want to be together anymore. Like, please just give me a sign, basically, that this is the right thing. I've done the right thing to do. And as I was walking into school that day, and as I did, a girl turned up on her bike, stopped me, and it's a girl who basically, when I became a Christian, me and her used to have massive fights in general studies about Christianity, because she was so anti-religion, and I'd found this newfound faith, and I was just still as, you know, argumentative as I was before, but just now with God, you know, just now about God. And we used to just really didn't like each other at all. We used to just fight. And she stopped her bike and she said, Peacock, because that's what they used to call me, Peacock, we've all been thinking about what we can get you for a wedding present, and we want you to let us know. So we really want to give you a wedding present. And it was really interesting, because I thought she usually wouldn't have stopped to speak to me, and I'd just been praying about, you know, whether it was right to get married. And then it was almost like a sign. And then I got another one where her uncle in Aberdeen contacted her and said, we didn't have any money, obviously, because we were in sixth form, so we neither of us, we had a part-time job, and I think I was on £2.30 an hour. And that was what everybody's going, what are you going to do for money? You know, my parents were saying it and going, what are you going to do? You got no money. We're just like, stuff it. My mum had this big list of like things off the internet of things you had to have for a wedding, and I just went, no, don't need that, don't want that. She's just going, well, you can't do that. Yeah, we don't need that. We'll get married in jeans and t-shirt. We were just totally not bothered about that. Anyway, he rang and said, look, I've found a ring on Aberdeen Beach, and if I got the story right, he handed it into the police, and then after a certain amount of time, if it doesn't get claimed, comes back. So it came back. We went up to Aberdeen to visit his granny. At this point, I actually had holy shoes from Windsor's in 6 foot of snow, and I'd sellotaped my shoes up. So it was a really good way to meet your in-laws. And he said, this ring's come back. Do you want to see if it fits? And it was a diamond wedding ring. Put it on, and it fitted Morag's tiny hands perfectly. And it was just like, you know, lots of little things like that were just like God's just been incredibly gracious here and showing us, you know, and confirming to us. So yeah, so then I decided that I was going to church, and I'd done the Alpha course, and they said, well, why don't you think about baptism? And this lovely old lady called Betty Hurd in the church, and I used to go on my bike on a midweek night, Wednesday, Thursday night, to a house on the edge of the country, and she took me through this baptism course. She's just lovely, and I'd always come back with like something she'd given us for our wedding. So she gave us like a lot of plates, and they were like strapped to the back of my bike, and just loads of stuff like that. She was a lovely old lady. And she said, "Oh, you need to give a testimony at the service." And I'd not thought about it until the way there in the car. So as I was going in the car, I thought, "Oh, flip, I've not thought about what I'm going to say." And so I just basically sort of improvised. And as I was starting to tell people about seeing that crucifixion scene in this gig, I just broke down in uncontrollable tears in front of the whole church. And I was like not sort of allowed to do that. I was like really, I never would have let anybody see me cry in public. I was sort of wanted to be this tough lad. And it was just like, that was the first real felt experience, I think, of the Holy Spirit that I had. And it was like, wow, I couldn't even get through the testimony. I was just absolutely uncontrollable tears. And it was like, wow, God really is real. He was just proving himself to me over that time.
I can't remember where I was, but it was on one of my travels somewhere or other, that I came across one of your teachers.
Oh.
It was in a church somewhere, and I can't for the life of me remember where it was, but she talked about you both, and about how, how young you were when you got married, and all the rest of it, but how the teachers actually they really rooted for you, and they wanted you to do well, and they kind of knew it was such a big risk in a sense, and so unusual, perhaps more unusual than a risk, to be honest. But she remembered you and remembered the conversations they'd had. So when you talked about that earlier thing of the teacher saying, "Well, we want to give you something," she would have been part of that. She may well have been the same woman who spoke to you, but it was interesting meeting them. I mean, you were remarkably a young couple, and you're married now 21 years, and you're still only 25, which is, but here you are, 21 years married. Your children are, on the way to independence, if not, there. What were the joys of being married so young? What were the challenges? And I suppose that the much more significant question, probably for everybody who's married or in a relationship, is how do you keep it fresh after 20 years? Just after 20.
Yeah. So joys, I suppose. I think, I don't know who said it, but it was somebody said something about, I think it might have been somebody at our church, actually, which was obviously a lot later than when we got married, but said something about, when the question was, is your wife a better person because she's married to you? And are you a better person because you're married to your wife? And I genuinely think that both of us are. I actually think we complement, like we're both really strongly opinionated. We both argue, like we will argue even when we both know we're wrong. But I genuinely think that, for example, Morag's brought to me a sense of stability. My morals are all over the place, and my understanding was so little of Christianity, and I had the enthusiasm and the joy of a new believer, but she had the level-headedness, the wisdom that I just didn't have, and that sort of sense of, I'm quite impulsive and she's not, and it was like, so I just generally think that we have complemented one another in lots of different ways. You'd have to ask her how I might have helped her. I wouldn't like to say, but she's certainly.
And there was a long pause.
Yeah, move on. Next question, please. But she's, I think we are better, not just Christians, but better people because of being with one another, for the most part. As well as the obvious stuff that probably everybody would imagine, the companionship and the sharing the ups and downs of life with somebody. You kind of think, well, even when you let yourself down, and even when there's nobody else there to turn to, that your wife or your husband are always going to be there. They've got your back. They're the ones who'll stand by you, and it's like, well, that's a great assurance to have in life, isn't it? You're not going to always have your parents. You might not always have your friends, and you certainly can't always rely on yourself. So having somebody who will always be there no matter what, even when you royally mess up, like Morag's the one who's there going, yeah, you've stuffed up here, but we go again. So there's the joy. There's some of the joys. Challenge is obviously when we were young, we had obviously had no money, and I think a lot. My best man, no, not my best man. One of the lads who was one of my best mates in my band, said to me on my wedding night, "Well, mate, I hope it lasts a year." So I mean, he was that. My dad laughed at me when I said we were getting married. That was his first reaction. My brother was like, "Well, you've got to think about it first." I'm like, well, yeah, I did. And then there was a mixture of other like worriedness and anxiety from people going, "How are you going to cope? What are you going to do?" And obviously we had no money, but we're just like, we're not. It doesn't matter. You don't need any money. We'll just as long as we're sort of, it sounds cheesy, doesn't it? But as long as you're together, it doesn't really matter where we're living or what we're doing. And it was challenging in the early days because obviously Maura became pregnant the 2 weeks after she found she had a university place at Manchester Met Uni to do acting, and it was a really difficult course to get into. 2,000 people applied for it and only 28 places were given. And she was like so chuffed that she got on it, and I'd got in at Salford to do popular music and recording. So it was like, oh, we're going to the right city. We can stay, we can both study. And then we found she was pregnant within 2 weeks of her getting that place. So then she deferred and thought we'll do it the year after. And then we just like the reality of you've got a baby now. Like you're not going to be able to do a 40-hour course and have a baby and be around and be a wife. And so I was like basically to start with, she was working at Marks and Spencer's on a minimum wage, and I had Cameron for a bit. Then we swapped. I worked 20 odd hours in a bank, which I hated, and did my degree. And then we had Ewan in year 2, and Morag's, Morag's dad was killed in a car accident in our first year of uni as well, and he was only 44. And we were trying to sort of come back to York and support the family, and as well as sort of dealing with, how difficult that was for Morag and her family anyway. So just a lot happened in a short space of time. So it was just a really, really difficult few years, and we had no money. We lived in a council house in a really rough area of Salford and burnt out cars all the time. And it was just like, this is not really the sort of idyllic picture of happy family life that we'd hoped for. But then, we still, even in the middle of all that, we still stuck it out and wasn't always happy. It was an unhappy few years, to be honest, particularly for Maura, because she was at home on her own. She didn't know anybody. She was in a strange city. She had no way of meeting anybody. She didn't have a car. I was at uni, so I met people. I was in a band still, and we were gigging. That was the other thing. So I was always gigging and meeting people, and I was working. So I got all the social life, and I was part of the Christian Union, and we were the only couple, obviously, the Christian Union there, with a pram that we pushed to Christian Union. So, and it was like Morag didn't feel like she fitted in at all. So it was that was challenging. It was a challenging few years, really. Our first few years of marriage was challenging.
Let me talk about the music, because interesting. You talk about being at school and enjoying the singing and singing louder than anybody else, and and you were in the band. You've been in bands. You were a music lecturer then, but you also had this sort of perhaps the hope at one time, particularly of sort of making it in the music business. Talk about the tension or the coming to terms with how life has actually panned out, as opposed to perhaps when you were 20, what you might have longed for it to have been like.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of lads, you wanted to be a professional footballer, and then you realise you're not good enough to be a professional footballer. And then I discovered music like 14, 15, and it was like, oh, I want to be a rock star now. Like I just want to follow in the footsteps of people like Oasis and Blur, and I just want to do that. Like imagine doing that for a living, playing guitar, singing, people singing your songs back to you in a like Coldplay or whatever. Just imagine that. I just couldn't think of anything better. And the buzz of playing in front of people when people are enjoying themselves and just seeing it, and the sound you make when it sounds good, it's just like, oh, there's just such a good feeling. And then obviously becoming a Christian, it was like, oh, right, well, I'll be a Christian. I was already in a band with 3 other non-Christians. So I use this as my sort of platform to evangelize, really. So I evangelize into the band members, and also then the songs I write and contribute to the band, we were playing them in the band. So it was really interesting because we had this they were really happy. They were really, to be fair, they were quite gracious, because I was very aggressive, the evangelistic in the early days, and I said all sorts of stuff to people, and some of it was not appropriate or very sensitive, But they were really good about, and because the songs sounded good, they almost didn't care what the lyrics were about anyway. Because a lot of pop songs, who cares about the lyrics? I think I must be one of the only people who really listens to lyrics and wonders what the songs are about. And people used to come up to us at gigs going, "Oh, I just love that song about the big white gates of heaven, and just really love that song." And they were all non-Christians, and some of the best conversations we had were after gigs, around with a few beers, and that's where people opened up. That's where, particularly blokes, that's where they'd be asking questions. It was great. So I thought, oh, this is where God's going to use me. I'll be a famous musician, but I'll be a Christian. And then as things sort of developed, that band, two of the lads left, and we just got signed. We just played at Leeds Festival in 2000. It was like, this is amazing. And then they left. They decided to do something else. We just got an independent record deal, and it was like, oh man, this is awful. Like, I thought the dream was, being realized. I was working in a bank, and it was like, oh, this is rubbish. Like, I just want to do music. And then obviously writing and recording on my own stuff as well. And then I thought, well, just get another couple of members, and we'll make it our own band. So I called it The Everlasting. But it was like the sort of crossover. It was kind of like U2, kind of quasi. Didn't sound like U2, but it was that sort of thing where some songs are obviously about God, other songs are just about all sorts of other things, relationships, and sometimes you don't know the difference. And it was that sort of thing. And then we got into, when I was at over in Salford, we went to our previous church. We really got into. I suppose it was a lot of meetings about the presence of God and waiting on God, and I suppose like about trying to become more holy, honor God more, and I think we found, there was me and a friend who were in the band, and we were both Christians at that. So I'd invited another Christian to join this band, and he said, well, maybe we should be just doing worship music, and maybe we shouldn't be doing this, secular band. We should just do worship music. I said, yeah, maybe that's what we should be doing. So then we basically quit the band, which in hindsight, I kind of wish we'd not done it now, but quit the band. And then we started trying to write worship music, and I just never felt like it was, that the music I was writing was that, even though my heart was to honor God, it just never seemed to come out as well as the other stuff. And I didn't feel the same joy playing it. It was just, I know it's for different purposes, but just like, this is almost like there's a lack of creativity in some of it that I was doing. It was almost like, let's make it as simple as I can because people are going to sing it. But actually felt like I wasn't honoring God with my creativity as well. So it was like, there's people over here in the pubs and the bars who love what I'm doing, but they would hate this. And then there's people over here who love this, who would hate that. But then I somehow felt like I was like a combination of both, but I didn't really have the right avenue to explore it. So then I just, it was like, right, well, I'm not in the band anymore, but we'll keep going, just writing Christian stuff. And so then, and also at the same time, I thought, well, maybe I need to park the dream of becoming a musician. And plus, obviously, we had 2 kids at this time. I need to get myself a proper job. Basically, I can't just like go on the road with my guitar. I've got 2 kids and a wife at home. Like, so what am I going to do? And in the end, I decided to go for teaching, because I thought, well, at least I can teach music and also can become, hopefully a positive role model. And, I like being around young people and stuff. So I became a teacher, music teacher. And then basically for the next 13 years, I spent, after the first year of realizing that actually teaching was not what I expected it to be, I spent the next 12 years basically going, I don't really like loads of aspects of teaching. I like being with the kids and I love music, but I just do not like the politics of it all and all the nonsense that goes along with it. But I've got to stick it out because I'm the only wage earner in the house, and now there's another child on the way. And then, so basically I was spending all my free time then trying to make music, kind of still trying to look for ways of making music as a living. So I looked into publishing, and a publisher said, oh, I really like some of your stuff. And so I started writing for publishing, but that became like almost all encompassing. So I'd spend a lot of my evenings just with a laptop on my knee, headphones on my head, so you're disengaging at home in the hope that something might click and you might be able to make music you live in. And as soon as you get on the bottom ladder of publishing, you realize how big the ladder goes and how hard it is to make any money. And it was like, I'm spending hours and hours and hours writing all these instrumental tunes and stuff and some of them got used in like the Tonight Show and things like that, and Emmerdale and stuff. And it was like, oh wow, how much did I get at the end of the year? 40 quid. Like, I must have spent 40 hours doing it, like more than maybe 400 hours. I don't know, but so it was like, wow, this isn't gonna work. Like, I'm not gonna be able to spend all this time doing music in my spare time. So basically, I came to the conclusion that music basically became a bit of an obsession, maybe an idol in Christian speak, that I was looking for the music job to be the thing that fulfilled me, and naturally, there's no job that can do that. And it came to a head really when I was looking at tribute bands, and I thought, I could do a tribute band maybe because they earn decent money. You see, like original bands, I never met any money in my original bands because nobody will pay to listen to your music. But if you get in a tribute band, you can earn quite good money. So I got offered a part in a tribute band, in Travelling Wilburys as Tom Petty, probably because I'm so skinny. And then when you looked at the itinerary, it was like they were spending every weekend away. They were from Brighton to Hebrides to the Isle of Wight to, they were mainly middle-aged blokes who'd already either had a marriage and no longer married, or had kids and now they've grown up. And I was not in that camp. So then I saw this one for the Beatles band. I thought, oh, brilliant! Like, I love the Beatles. And the drummer, I knew the drummer because through a mutual contact at university, I'd depped a few bands, like covers bands, playing The Who and The Kinks and stuff with him. And he's a really nice guy. He'd been in this Beatles band for 20 years called the Cheetles. And they were really good. And the bass player who played Paul McCartney, he left to join the Bootleg Beatles, who were like the premier Beatles tribute band. So they were looking for somebody to replace him. And I'd said to Morag, look, this could be like my last crack, really, of trying to make music for a living. And it could be a way of getting out of a job that I hate as well. And she basically, after a lot of debate, she's like, you've got to go for it because, you just never know. So I went for it, got the part. But then it didn't take long before it was like, this is crazy life. This is, leaving at 12 midday. I'm getting back at 3 or 4 in the morning. I've either got the cafe to get up for in the morning, or I've got church, or I've got kids and a wife, and I'm just knackered all the time. And I'm on the road with these guys that are still trying to live the rock and roll dream, but they're playing in a Beatles band, traveling around hotels. And it's just like great for that half an hour or 45 minutes, or, 2 45-minute slots you get playing Beatles music, which I love. And I really do. And it sounded great. But then you've got 10 hours of messing about, waiting around, traveling around it. And it was just like, I'm neglecting Morag, I'm neglecting the kids, I'm never around, I'm tired all the time, just for the sake of an hour's playing Beatles music that I like, and getting, it was quite good money. But basically after like 9 months, I was like, this is just not, I can't be, you have to be basically quite a selfish person, I think, or be on your own to make it work. You have to be willing to neglect your marriage and your children to do it. And I wasn't willing to do that. So it's like, well, but then the worry was like, well, I don't know where the money's going to come from, but God just, God provided it, in ways of, upping my hours at work, at church, and God provided. So I feel like I've kind of finally put the nail in the coffin of trying to make music the sort of career, and just now hopefully I can have a sort of more healthy relationship with it, where I can be creative. When an idea comes, I can continue to lead worship, which is great. And I think I belittled that as well. I think I belittled how important leading worship was to a congregation as well. I think I thought, oh, that's the easy bit where I just play at church on a Sunday, and it was like, hang on a minute, I've got 100 people in front of me here. We're all trying to connect with God together. That's amazing. That's really profound. What a great privilege and a great, honor to do it. And I think I just sort of diminished that because I thought, performing the thing that I should be doing. So I think I've sort of had a big change in opinion over the last couple of years, and hopefully I'm in a healthier place for it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, isn't it? That and it's so easy to do. Like leading worship with 100 people who are trying to connect with God is somehow less significant than playing to 80 people in a hotel. please, love me do, or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's a really it's kind of a moving story actually to hear the wrestling with an obsession, really. And I think it's right to use that language of idolatry and obsession. I think they become very close to each other.
Mm.
The nice thing about interviewing you is that I don't need to ask many questions. So here's my last question.
Okay.
What do you think you've learned over the last 12 months? The 12 months where we've, everything's been constrained, where we've been sort of hemmed in physically. What do you think you've learned?
The two main things I've learned, I think, are one, the importance of community, relationships, the importance of people, and the second thing is really about healthy rhythms. I think often I've been, because I'm quite a driven person, and I've always been like, oh, that's what's the next big project we're doing, whether that be music, recording, writing an album, recording it, or whether that be, I don't know, in the band or even in church, like what's the next big event we're going to do? And, like I wanted to be involved in loads of things. And it basically just, and I suppose the two things are quite connected actually. But sometimes people can become almost like a means to an end, where you almost forget who's in front of you because you're just thinking about the end goal of the project, the event, the meeting, the service, whatever it is. And I think what I've realized this year is that when all that's been stripped away and we've not been able to do big events and projects and things, and not been able to, do all that, the busyness has sort of gone for me. What I've really missed is people. I mean, and again, I know everybody probably would say the same, but for me, it was more than just, I'm missing people this year. It's like I've realized that I'm missing people that are in front of me, that I'm not valuing the individuals who are made in the image of God, who are there in front of me right now, who I can listen to and hopefully say something helpful or, support. And I think God's just really challenged me of like if you strip all the meetings and services and projects away, what will be left is people. And that's actually far more important than anything else we do. If we do nothing else next year, but we just meet and encourage one another, like that will be a win. And I think that will be true not just because of having a year where we've not been able to meet, but actually forever. Like if that doesn't, I'm hoping this will be a profound change that I'll take with me, for the rest of my days, really. And then the other thing which is linked to it is the busyness that I've ended up being. I think I've been a bit of a workaholic, really. Kind of, you're always looking for the next big thing to do. You're always looking for I've got this, I've got so many things to do. And I just remember, like, when you speak to people, when you say to people, how are you doing? And the response, like, usually is, and the response I usually get, was either tired or busy. And it's just like, there's no real reason for me to be tired or busy. Like, I don't have to, I can be busy, but be like hurried and harassed. And I've read a couple of books that have been incredibly helpful. And I've listened to some great podcasts as well. And obviously the pace of life, because my job's completely changed this year, the pace of life has totally dropped as well. I've just started to remember that, I'm working part-time 4 days a week, and that's great. That's a massive privilege to only work 4 days a week. I'm going to take a Sabbath. I've never had taken a Sabbath in my life. I used to see it as a sort of religious thing. That was like, we don't need to do that anymore because, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So in a sense, like, why would I do it? But then I've seen it as like, this is this incredible gift that God has given us. It's not like you have to do it to please God. It's God's given it as an invitation, as a gift to you. If you don't take it, you're the one who's missing out, not God. And I was like, I've never had a day where I just turn my phone off and don't check emails and the anxiety levels, go massively down and got just a healthier rhythm, like in the morning, getting up. And we're really privileged because we can work at home. But for the first time in 21 years, Morag and I get up in the morning together. We read the Bible together while we're eating our breakfast. We pray a little bit before we start the day. I'm just like, that's an absolute gift. And I want that to continue next year. I want that to, to carry on. I want to start my day like that. And I don't want to, I want to be able to turn my phone off at a certain time, not check emails, and just feel a lot healthier and happier for it, and not be, somebody said, this is true, but I think it is, that Jesus was never in a hurry. You don't seem to get Jesus was, everybody wanted a piece of Jesus, but he never seemed hurried. So you think about Lazarus, and he let Lazarus die and took ages to get to him, to his graveside, and he was one of his best mates. He never seemed to be in a hurry, and he always took this healthy rhythm of life of going and being alone with his father, and and praying. And so yeah, those are the two things I'll take: a healthier work life rhythm, and the importance of people.
It's a good thought. And the other thing about Jesus is that he didn't try and do everything.
Mm.
I was thinking, I don't know why I was thinking about this the other day, but I was kind of just reflecting on the idea. So Paul, we know a lot about Paul because he wrote letters because he was in prison a lot of time because he had time. Jesus could have written, but chose not to.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, I've got some things to do, but I can't do other things. And I think there's that sense of the contentment you learn in life is perhaps where you, and it takes some of us ages, but to get there, but where you realize I can't have it all.
Mm.
You can't be in the Beatles and leading worship and being a father and being a husband and working. You can't have it all. But
Mm.
I think that the devil pushes us into believing you can have it all, just work harder, and
Yeah.
then of course you lose your soul in the midst of it. And maybe I don't know if that's exactly what Jesus meant when he said you can gain the whole world but you can lose your soul. But I think it is part of what is involved in that.
Mm.
We could talk and talk and talk, and we will once we stop recording. But for this, I want to say thank you for your willingness just to open the window a little bit on who you are and the journey to where you've blessed so many people in so many different ways, both in your friendship, in the leadership you've been involved with, and just in sharing your life with it. And I think there are lots and lots of people who will give thanks to God for you. So thank you that you're part of us. We're that's just an ongoing delight. And yeah, we would want to pray blessing on you and your family as you go forward. So thanks for this afternoon. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.